Hello Scouts and Scouters. Today we're going to be exploring some tips and tricks that you may find useful during your outdoor adventures. We'd like to be able to tell you that we thought all these up on our own, but as a scout is trustworthy, we have to admit that we have borrowed these from folks over the years, both in person and from internet research. So here's the list. We're going to be talking about tips and tricks for your Bic lighter, things that you can do with the lip balm or chapstick that you may carry in your pocket, and ways to keep your extremities, your hands, and particularly your feet warm during those cold late fall, winter, and early spring campouts and other outdoor activities. Having said all this, let's get started. Now, here are some tips and tricks to use with your Bic lighter. At this point, we want to take the opportunity to give credit for two of the brief clips in this series to Matt Mercer of Black Hat Bushcraft. You'll be able to tell Matt's clips by the professional quality. So let's proceed.
Let's talk about some useful tips for your Bic lighter. Every scout and scouter has used his or her Bic lighter to start a small fire, start their camp stove, but eventually drops it somewhere around the campsite. Hopefully you purchase a brightly colored lighter, red, yellow, or orange, to contrast with the environment. Can you see the brightly colored lighters on the ground below? You can see that the lighters are much more visible in the snow, especially the red one, which was not as visible in the grassy area. But both lighters are very visible in the snow. Here's another useful tip for you and your lighter. Attach a loop string with approximately 1 foot of Gorilla Tape to the bottom of the end of your lighter. It can then be easily attached to a carabiner on your pack or on your jacket. The Gorilla Tape can also be used as an emergency fire starter. I've taken the piece of Gorilla Tape off the bottom of the lighter, and we're going to rip this into small strips like this. Then, when we're done with these strips, we're going to go outside and we're going to be utilizing this for a fire starter. So let's go outside and see how it works. Let's take a look at how our Gorilla Tape can be used as an emergency fire starter. So you can see this.
That bunch of tape will burn that way for a good 4 to 5 minutes. An excellent fire starter.
I know we've shown you a little bit of work with our Bic lighter and how to do things with it. One of the things that possibly could happen that you want to avoid, and that's to lose the fluid in your lighter. And that can happen with the depression of this on the lighter. And if you put this in your pocket or you put it in your pack, there's always the opportunity for it to catch on that, press it down, have it pressed in either in your backpack or in your pocket, and the lighter fluid is just going to come up and you're going to lose all of your lighter fluid. So we're going to show you how to tie what they call a Canadian jam knot to prevent that from happening. All right, so let's take a look and see how the jam knot works on your lighter. You place the jam knot on the lighter with the line underneath the striker. You pull it as tight as you can against the lighter. So it's tight up against the lighter right now. And now that cannot be pressed down and the gas will not escape. When you need it, when you need your lighter, all you have to do is pull this one tab on this side and lift it up. So you can put it on, tighten it up, and then pull the other tab and loosen it up to get your lighter. That prevents the gas from escaping from your lighter when it's not in use.
Just in case you don't know how to tie a Canadian jam knot, it's as simple as tying one overhand knot in the end of your cordage. Some people call that a pretzel knot because it looks like a pretzel. Now you take that same end with the knot in it and wrap it around the standing end of the cord. And you simply tie another overhand knot here, which essentially creates like a noose. And when you cinch that tight, that first stopper knot will work its way down and jam up against the second knot like this. So this tag end loosens it and the other end will tighten it. Once it tightens, it doesn't loosen on its own until you pull the tag.
Chapstick, very useful in scouting, especially in the winter months, in hiking or when you're camping around a campsite in the boys, or in the backyard if you're in the backyard out in the winter months. Chapstick can be used for many things. It can be used, one, as in first aid, for instance. You could take, if you have a small cut on your finger, on your hair, you scraped your finger or whatever, you could take a little bit of the chapstick and place it on that cut. It does a couple of things. One, if it's just a slow oozing of blood, it'll stop the bleeding, slow bleeding. It will prevent dirt from going into that cut. So chapstick can be used for first aid. It also can be used, especially if you're hiking, or if they're at a campsite in the winter and are out there playing around. We can use this for preventing, for instance, windburn, or frost nip, or frostbite. One of the things you want to do is, if you know you're going to be out there in the winter, you're going to be running and playing in the snow, one of the things you can do is spread some of the chapstick on the tips of your nose, on your lips, on your cheeks, on your other cheek, and of course both ears, anything that's an extremity. The extremities are the things that will freeze first or have a tendency to go to frost nip or frostbite. So chapstick can be used for that purpose. It also can be used as a fire starter. There are other uses for chapstick also. It can be used as a fire starter. How can we do that? Well, if you go into your first aid kit, or if you're carrying, most of scouts are going to be carrying some type of Q-tip in their first aid kit. And on the end of the stick is a cotton piece. So you pull that all off, pull that cotton off of the stick. Once you have that cotton off, and you pull it apart a little bit, spread it apart, take a little bit of the Q-tip, of the chapstick, take a little bit of that off, mix it on the cotton ball, get it nice and saturated with the Vaseline or the Q-tip, the chapstick. And if you place it in an area, you could take your lighter. Come on, lighter. And light it. And you can see we now have, that's going to light for quite a while. It'll stay lit for a good minute and a half or so, which you should be able to start your fire with it as a fire starter. Another use for chapstick, is a very useful use for chapstick, is to help your zippers work better. It can be a zipper on a jacket, but more important, think about your tent flies and the zippers on your tents and your tent flies. Those always are a problem. So what you can do with the chapstick is spread it up a little bit, run on the zipper itself, up and down your zipper with the chapstick. Both sides. We're going to do the other side too. We'll do it on this side too. We'll take a little bit of chapstick up and down your zipper. This particular jacket has been sticking a bit, so I'm using this. I think it's going to work out real well. So you got enough chapstick on the zipper. Then it's just a matter of getting your zipper on and then running your zipper up and down. As soon as I can get the zipper set, running it up and down over and over again until it runs smoothly. Once it runs smoothly, you're done. Works real fine. Keeps your zippers working real well, especially on your tent and tent flies. If you're like me and use your jacket often at a during camping, you're always around a campfire and there's always these little embers coming up, and of course every now and then one of those embers comes and lands on your coat, on your jacket. So what you can do is take a little bit of the chapstick and place it on the hole in on the jacket, and that seals that hole for a period of time anyway. So if it's raining, there's no water that's going to enter in that little hole on your jacket. Same thing on your fly in your tent. If you have a small tiny hole in your tent fly and it's raining, what's going to happen? The water's going to come through that hole and down on you. So what you need to do is just take your chapstick, go to that hole, cover it, and for that period of time anyway, for that night, it should be okay. You may have to do it again if it's 2-night stand, but it works real well. It'll keep the water from coming in and dripping on you.
I found these boot inserts in ShopRite the other day. They're composed of a felt insulating layer topped by a shiny layer that faces your foot. That shiny layer acts to reflect body heat, infrared radiation, body heat back toward your foot, helping to keep it warm. These inserts cost $7 and still have to be cut individually to fit your boot. If you're interested in a lower per person cost and also interested in a family or patrol or troop project, then I suggest that you listen to the instructions that Ray is about to give you.
Let's look at another tip for keeping your feet warm. Keeping your feet warm during the late fall and winter and early spring campouts and other outdoor activities is important to you and your scouts. Let's look at a simple trick that can keep you and your feet toasty warm. Start by purchasing a window reflector at your local auto store or at the dollar store. Once you have that done, you take your shoe, pull out the liner of your shoe. You take the liner of your shoe out, or your boot. What you're going to do is turn the liner down, and you're going to take a magic marker and you're going to draw around the edge now. I think you can see, although it's, okay, good enough. All right. Next, what you need to do is take a pair of scissors and cut out around carefully cut around We now have an outline of your boot. Now what you need to do is first take your boot, cut this piece and put it inside your boot. Make sure it's snug and around all the way to the front and to the back. And then take your liner, your original liner, and place it in your boot. The insulation of this reflector is going to keep your feet nice and toasty warm. If you want something heavier than that, you can go to Home Depot or another Depot store where it's a little bit thicker than that. Perform the same by drawing your lines on here for your liner, and take this and place it inside your boot. It just makes it a little bit tougher depending on how tight your shoe is, whether you can get your foot in once you have that. So those are the things you can do to keep your feet toasty warm.
Okay, now we're going to talk about how to use socks to keep your feet warm in the winter. We're going to talk about what to do and what not to do. And what not to do is to use this kind of a sock. You'll see a lot of times scouts and sometimes adults will want to use cotton socks inside their boots in cold weather because the cotton is nice and comfy, it feels good against their skin, and they'll want to wear those cotton socks. The problem is that the character that makes cotton king in warm weather is what makes it a potential killer in cold weather. When cotton gets wet, it absorbs the water. The fibers of the cotton swell, the water forces out the insulating air pockets, and next to your skin, instead of having a nice, comfy, dry sock, what you've got is a cold, soggy, wet, heat-conducting mess that is sucking heat away from your feet. So cotton socks are a no-no in cold weather. Ray and I recommend instead what we call a two-sock method, and we're going to take a look at that right now. Okay, down here you can see that I have 2 layers of socks on my feet. One is an inner layer of synthetic fiber. This happens to be polypropylene, which is what we like, but there are other synthetic fibers you could use. It's an inner liner sock overlain by a thicker insulating sock, and we like to use wool. We think this is really good. Now, why these 2 particular kinds of socks? The synthetic fiber, in this case the polypropylene, is what we call hydrophobic. It does not absorb water. In fact, you can even think about it as a water repeller. And what it will tend to do is wick the moisture away from your skin to the other side of the sock, keeping your foot drier than it would be. The insulating sock over the top, being wool, is good because wool, even when it's wet, retains the ability to insulate. It's not hydrophobic, but it doesn't absorb water. The air pockets inside the fibers of the wool remain there, and the wool retains its insulating ability. So an inner layer of a synthetic fiber overlain by an outer layer of an insulator, in this case wool, provides a great insulator for keeping your feet warm in the winter. Now, some of you are going to say, that's nice, but I don't really want to have to deal with 2 layers of socks. Isn't there something else we can do? And the answer is yes, there is another option. It's a little more expensive, but you can do with a single sock that has an outer layer of wool and synthetic fiber and has the nice fluffy polypropylene built right into the inside of the sock. So you have one sock that does double duty, but the strategy is still the same. An inner layer that wicks moisture away from your foot into an outer layer that's a really good insulator. And that's how you can keep your feet warm in the winter. Okay, now we're going to take a look at vapor barrier warmth. Okay, now we're going to talk about the concept of vapor barrier and how vapor barrier can be used to keep your extremities warm. Now, We're just going to be talking about vapor barrier in the context of an emergency that you need to keep your hands and your feet warm, or you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be standing and not moving, or only moving a little bit for a long period of time, such as if you're a station master at Klondike Derby, or at a cold weather camporee, or some unit activity where you're not going to be doing very much movement. The concept of vapor barrier over the general body is not going to be covered. That should only be covered by somebody who really knows what they're doing. All we're talking about is hands and feet. Okay, vapor barrier, a little anatomy, a little physiology, and a discussion of sensible and insensible sweat. Skin. Skin is the barrier that separates the inside of your body from the outside world. It's what keeps your insides safe from the outside. In order for the skin to do its job, it has to remain supple, flexible, and intact. In order for that to happen, the body has to do something to keep it that way. And in fact, most of what the body does is by secreting micro amounts of sweat from every pore in the skin all over your body. Now we're saying micro amounts. We're talking about a layer, a film of moisture over your skin that's probably only several molecules thick. But that's enough to keep your skin supple, keep it flexible, keep it from drying out, getting brittle, and cracking. Okay. That is called, because you can't see it and you can't feel it, you can't sense it, that is, that's what's called insensible sweat. It's the sweat, the micro amounts of sweat that are constantly being secreted by your body as an outside layer. Sensible sweat is the liquid water that you sense, that you perceive, that you can see and feel when you're overheated, when you're working hard, when you're exercising. Sensible sweat is actually a body's way of regulating its temperature. That sensible sweat evaporates, and you know this from experience, when it evaporates, it cools you off. That's a good thing. Unfortunately, the same thing happens to that insensible sweat that's only a few molecules thick on the outside of your skin. As soon as that is secreted, it begins to absorb heat from your body and soon evaporates and goes off into the atmosphere. Thus, it has to constantly be replaced. At the same time, it is also constantly conducting heat away from your body. That's not a good thing. That's called evaporative heat loss. What can we do to slow down or stop the evaporation of insensible sweat from the skin and preserve your body heat? And we're going to talk about that. Let's talk about the practical application of vapor barrier. What we want to do is overlay the skin with something that is impermeable to those water molecules, to that water vapor, something that will not let them pass and will keep that water next to the skin, prevent it from evaporating. On the hands, and particularly to take care of the fingers, we can use a surgical-like glove. These come in a number of different models. There's latex, there's vinyl. This one happens to be nitrile, which is what I like because it's the least allergenic of the gloves. And what you want to do is just pull the glove on over your hand. Make sure you get a glove that's the right size for you. If you get one that's too big, it's not going to work right. If you get one that's too small, you're going to end up pushing through the ends of your fingers through the glove and breaking it. So here I have this nitrile glove on my hand. It's close fitting to the skin, and it's going to prevent the water vapor, the insensible sweat, from evaporating and losing heat that way. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my normal insulated glove, put my hand with the nitrile glove on it inside my regular glove, cinch it up, and now I've essentially got a double layer. I've got a vapor barrier preventing evaporative heat loss from the insensible sweat, plus I've got my normal insulating layer over the top. Should keep my hands, and especially my fingers, warmer than they would be otherwise. Okay, let's talk about using the vapor barrier method to keep your feet, and especially your toes, warmer than they would be without it. The idea is the same. You want to get an impermeable barrier laying over your skin to inhibit or prevent the evaporation of that insensible sweat so that you're not getting heat loss from your body that way. And what you can do is you can use a commercial vapor barrier sock, but they're really expensive, and you don't have to do that. You can use plastic bags. This happens to be a newspaper bag. A bread bag would also work. A bread bag is about the same size as a newspaper bag. Bread bags work fine. You could use this kind of a bag that comes from the frozen food or produce section of your grocery store. This would work fine. You could even in a pinch use this plastic grocery bag from your grocery store. It doesn't work quite as well because it's harder to get a good snug fit around your foot, but it will do in a pinch, and it's better than nothing. So let's take this newspaper bag and see how it works on the foot. Okay, the best way to do this actually is to take the bag and just slip it over the foot like this. Then you're going to smooth it around, twist it a little bit to make sure that you've got a nice close fit of the plastic against the skin. And then you would take your insulating sock, the wool sock that we talked about earlier, and put it over, directly over the plastic bag. Like that. Now you've got a vapor barrier and an insulating sock over your foot. Now, what happens is a lot of times people say, I don't like the feeling of the plastic right against my skin. And I don't like that clammy feeling that I get after a while because the moisture ends up getting trapped between my skin and the plastic. I don't like that feeling. Isn't there something I can do? And the answer is yes, you can. What you're going to do is instead of putting the plastic directly over your foot, the first thing you'll do is put on an insulating, a wicking sock. In this case, we're putting on our polypropylene sock. Put that on first. Then put the plastic bag over the polypropylene sock. Same thing. You're going to twist it around a little bit to make sure it fits snugly against the foot. Then you're going to put the wool sock over the plastic bag, which is in turn over the polypropylene liner sock. What happens is the polypro sock, just as before, will tend to wick the moisture away from the skin and put it between the sock and the plastic bag. You won't feel the plastic against your skin, and you won't have that same clammy feeling because of the moisture lying directly against your skin. And that's how you use a vapor barrier to help keep your feet, and particularly your toes, warm on those cold weather activities when you're not going to be moving around too much.
Well, this is the end of the video, but if you picked up at least one new idea, then this should also be the beginning of you doing better in the outdoors. Get out there and put the outing in scouting.